the conclusion of the teaching part, the main teaching part of the Sermon on the Mount. And it's sort of like a climax. And Matthew adds a little summary particle in Greek, and because this is the summary of the law and the prophets, if we are good to others and want as we are to ourselves. In many ways, of course, what Matthew is doing is saying, this is the great commandment of love that Jesus gave us, and ultimately is the touchstone of how we act in the Sermon on the Mount. So that's the big second part. And then now, the final part, which corresponds to the Beatitudes, salt of the earth, light of the world, the final part, again it's in 3 warnings. And what he's trying to say is in this, A, life is short, join the kingdom, live like this. So the first of these is the narrow gate. Come into the kingdom. It's a narrow gate, but do come. Let's not waste time. Let's enter the kingdom. The second of these is, so who are we going to listen to? We all need to follow somebody that we're inspired by. Who's a false prophet? Who's a good prophet? And so on. By your fruits you'll know them. Interestingly, we've got a little taste here of Jesus as the judge, the last judge. Because it says that Jesus is going to be the judge. And the final part of that is to say that it isn't those who say to me, Lord, Lord, who will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the person who does the will of my Father in heaven. Again, it's God's will. It's being righteous that's important. Not words. Not words. So Jesus is actually saying too, by saying, it isn't those who say to me, Lord, Lord. And when he says a bit further, I've never known you, away from me, you evil people, in the same little place here, there's a little hint of the last judgment scene. Jesus as the judge. And then there's talking about 2 buildings, those who build on rock and those who build on sand. So, that's the big Sermon on the Mount. And now I'd like to move. The last part of today's presentation is going to be on Jesus, the healer and the reconciler. So we're looking at now the coming of God's kingdom into our sorry state of humanity. And we're needing him to come because we need healing in so many ways. We need healing from ordinary sickness. We need healing from feeling excluded. There are 10 miracles. Isn't that interesting? Moses performed 10 acts of power to harm the Egyptians. And Jesus appears now as the healing king. He's no longer, or is not, never presented as the son of David, the violent one. But he is son of David, he is a king, but he's a great healer. His actions are full of compassion. Even exorcisms are part of his healing ministry. There are 3 triads of miracles, but within those there is a progression towards where the Pharisees charged Jesus with collusion with Satan. And there you will see emerging a split within the Jewish nation. Those that will follow Jesus and those that will be against him. And the split will ultimately be over who has power to forgive sins. In Matthew, we have a different approach to the miracle stories than we do in Mark. Matthew tends to abbreviate the account of what happens, and he emphasizes more the conversations that take place, or the different sayings within the miracle story. Therefore, we say they are closer to an instructive story or a didactic story, whereas Mark will emphasize more the miraculous happening. We should note too that rabbis and other Jewish people performed miracles, and pagans performed miracles. Rabbi Gamaliel was able to calm storms. Rabbi Hananiah ben Doza healed the son of Gamaliel. That's a little bit within Judaism, but if we look out into the wider Hellenistic culture, in the 4th century BC, there's a fantastic place, Epidaurus. It's in modern-day Turkey. I hope you can visit it one day. That was like the Lourdes of the ancient world, because many people went there seeking healing from the god Asclepius. Pythagoras, the great Pythagoras, was known as a man of miracles. He talked to animals like St. Francis. He crossed the sea miraculously. He calmed strong winds and seas and so on. Another little thing we should say is that we're inheritors of the Enlightenment. So when we think of a miracle, we think of something which has to in some way go against the laws of nature. That's our worldview. That's how we think today. Whereas for Jewish people, it was some wonderful manifestation of God's power within our world. Now, I just want to speak briefly about, there are 3 triads of these miracles, but there are 10 miracles, because within one of the miracles, the healing of Jairus' daughter, there's the healing of the woman with the hemorrhage. So, there's 2 there, and we have 10 altogether. Isn't that because, and we think it is, because of a hint again of Moses. So the first triad is Christ acts for the marginalized. We have the story of the leper, the story of the Roman officer's son, the centurion's son, and we have Peter's mother-in-law. So just a little bit on that. First of all, the leper. Leviticus 13 and 14 condemn the leper to a life of misery. They've got to wear torn clothes. They've got to live by themselves. They've got to go around singing out, unclean, unclean, before they meet anybody. Now this, in Matthew's vision, is the symbol of us, fallen humanity. We are struggling in our lives. We are like the leper. And we've got to move into wholeness and community. We've got to move from our brokenness into feeling good about ourselves and part of our community. Now notice in the story, Jesus upholds the law, but he upholds the law because he tells the cleansed leper to go back and speak to the priest and then come back into community. That's what you have to do. But he touches the leper. Now that's most significant. That's what the law says you can't do. But what Jesus is saying, and we know, is that true cleanness comes not from not touching the leper, but true cleanness is something we catch by coming close to God. And just as the leper came close to Jesus and was touched by Jesus, so we are meant to come back into community, back to wholeness by coming close to Jesus. The centurion's son, just a little bit on that. Jesus, wonderfully, is prepared to go to the centurion's house. Again, that's something the law wouldn't